I don't know why I chose that day, December 10th last winter, to finally return to my mother's old house in Cleveland, Ohio. Maybe it was the way the first real snow of the season covered everything in white. Or maybe it was because the holidays had a way of making grief feel heavier. Mom had passed away only 6 weeks earlier, and since then I'd kept myself busy to avoid facing her absence. But the house, her house, needed to be cleaned out before the new year. That was the practical thing to do. Still, when I stepped inside, practicality dissolved. It smelled like pine cleaner, cinnamon candles, and old books, every scent that defined my childhood Christmases. The thermostat was still set to her stubborn 68 degrees Fahrenheit, and the heating vents squeaked the same way they had when I was 8. I'm 50 now, but walking in felt like stepping into a time capsule. The living room was exactly how she left it. Framed photos on the mantel, a half-finished knitting project on the couch, her glasses sitting beside a cup that probably once held chamomile tea. She always said she didn't like leaving dishes in the sink, not even overnight. I smiled at that memory, then cried. For hours I sorted through boxes, old birthday cards, graduation photos, bills she never threw away, scarves she knitted every winter but never wore. The sun dipped early at around 4:50 p.m., normal for Ohio winters, and the house grew so dim that the Christmas lights outside cast long shadows into the living room. Around 6 p.m., the wind picked up. A lake-effect snowstorm had been predicted, and by nightfall the windows were rattling. The lights flickered twice. I grabbed a flashlight just in case. That's when I remembered the attic. Mom never let me go up there alone as a kid. Too dusty, she'd say. But as I got older, she became oddly defensive about it. If I ever suggested cleaning it out, she'd brush it off quickly. Nothing up there is worth bothering with, Em. Leave it. So I did. For 30 years I did. That night, with the storm howling outside and the house colder than it should have been, I climbed the attic stairs. Each step creaked differently, and I swear the air changed, drier, older, like a place untouched for decades. The flashlight beam cut through the dust, and I spotted the usual storage boxes. But in the far corner, partially hidden under an old Christmas tree skirt, was a cedar chest. Mom's cedar chest. I froze. I hadn't seen it since I was maybe 10. Back then, Mom had told me it held things meant for grown-up Emily, but she never explained what that meant. After I turned 20, the topic disappeared completely. She never brought it up again, and honestly, I forgot it existed. My hands trembled when I brushed off the dust. The surface had tiny scratches. She must have used it often before hiding it away. The lock was old, not broken, but loose from decades of winter drying out the wood. I shouldn't open it. It felt wrong, but grief makes you reach for anything that connects you to the person you lost. One small push and the lid gave way with a soft crack. Inside were neatly folded items, all wrapped in tissue paper as if someone hid them carefully but lovingly. There was a faded Christmas card addressed to me in Mom's handwriting, dated 1994. There was a knitted baby blanket I didn't recognize, some Polaroids of her in Portland, Oregon at age 25, years before she married my father. But what struck me most was the plain white envelope buried under the blanket. My name on the front, no date, just "for Emily when the time is right." My stomach tightened. Mom wrote dozens of notes and reminders, but she never wrote letters, not like this, not with weight behind them. I sat on the attic floor, with snow battering the roof above me, and held the envelope as if it were alive. Something told me this wasn't a holiday message or forgotten birthday card. It felt heavier than paper should. But I didn't open it, not yet, because something about that moment felt like it wrong, like whatever was inside would shift the ground under my feet forever. I took the envelope downstairs, placed it on the kitchen table, and stared at it for what felt like an hour. The storm outside had cut the power, leaving only the soft glow of my flashlight against the walls. Finally, with trembling fingers, I opened it.
Inside the envelope was a folded, yellowing sheet of stationery, Mom's favorite kind, the type with tiny blue flowers pressed along the border. Her handwriting looked rushed, uneven, not her usual careful script. Emily, if life has brought you to this letter, it means I never found the courage to say certain things out loud. I hope you read this with a gentle heart. My chest tightened. This didn't sound like Mom's usual warm notes. This sounded like confession. She continued, "When you were little, I told myself I would explain everything when you were older, but time passes quickly when you're afraid, and eventually I lost the chance." I swallowed hard. Lost the chance? Did she mean Dad's death? In the winter of 1993, your father and I were going through a difficult time. You were too young to remember, but things were fragile between us. He was working long hours in Cleveland, and I visited Portland for a few months to take care of my aunt. During that time, I made a mistake I spent the rest of my life trying to bury. My heartbeat thudded painfully. Mistake? What kind of? I met someone in Portland, someone kind, someone who helped me when I felt alone and lost. I never planned for anything to happen, but it did. My breath hitched. I pressed the letter down, letting the words sink into me painfully slowly. Nothing about that time was simple, Emily, not for me and not for the man involved. For the man involved. So this wasn't just an emotional affair, it was more. When I returned to Cleveland, your father and I rebuilt our marriage. He forgave me for the distance I'd created. He never learned the full truth, and it was my choice to keep it that way. My hands grew cold. You were born 10 months later. Your father loved you with his whole heart. Please remember that. He was your joy, his pride, his purpose. I dropped my face into my hands and sobbed. Dad, my dad who raised me, taught me how to change a tire, who played carols on the radio every December. He never knew? The room felt like it was spinning. The old refrigerator hummed loudly in the background, the only sound in the dark house. I forced myself to keep reading. The man from Portland never knew about you. I didn't tell him. Looking back, I can't say if that was mercy or cowardice. I could almost hear Mom's voice, soft, trembling, like she was finally breaking after decades of holding it all inside. If you want to know who he is, his name is Thomas Reynolds. The last I knew, he lived in Nashville, Tennessee. There it was. Not an explosive reveal, not cruelty, not drama, just the truth. Heavy, human, devastating truth. But before I could process the name, the letter shifted again. Emily, I never wanted this to hurt you. I only wanted to protect the family we built. Your father loved you more deeply than words can say. If he were alive, I believe he would want you to know that nothing changes that." I pressed the letter to my chest and cried until I felt empty. I wasn't angry at Mom, not yet. I was too stunned to feel anything clearly. When the storm outside calmed, I tried standing, but my knees felt weak. I sat at the kitchen table for nearly an hour, staring at the name Thomas Reynolds. Why had she kept this from me? Why did she wait until after she was gone? And what was I supposed to do with this knowledge? Sleep didn't come easy that night. I sat in my childhood bedroom, surrounded by walls covered with old movie posters and fading paint, thinking about my life, all 50 years of it. Dad's death, Mom's secrets, my daughter Kayla, who was in Chicago for the holidays, my own marriage that ended 5 years earlier. Everything felt unstable, like my identity had a fault line running right through it. By morning, the snow had stopped. The neighborhood was covered in bright white powder, sunlight reflecting so sharply it hurt to look at. It should have been beautiful, but nothing felt calm inside me. For 3 days, I tried to distract myself, packing, sorting, making lists, but the letter stayed in my thoughts like a whisper I couldn't unhear. By December 15th, I made my decision. I needed answers, not to replace Dad, not to punish Mom, but to understand myself. So I packed a small suitcase, left the house keys with a neighbor, and booked a one-way flight from Cleveland Hopkins Airport to Nashville International. Before boarding, I texted Kayla that I was visiting an old friend for a few days. She sent back a heart emoji. I turned off my phone. During the 2-hour flight, turbulence rattled the plane over Kentucky, and I gripped the armrest harder than necessary. I wasn't afraid of flying. I was afraid of what waited for me when we landed. What if Thomas was dead? What if he didn't want to meet me? What if he did? What if everything changed? When the plane touched down in Nashville, it was 54 degrees Fahrenheit, warmer than Ohio, with a soft drizzle mist in the air. Holiday lights glowed across the terminal. Families hugged. Children wore matching pajamas. Meanwhile, I stood alone with a truth I never asked for. I took a cab to a small hotel near Brentwood, the suburbs just south of the city. Clean, quiet, decorated with tasteful Christmas wreaths, exactly the kind of place Mom would have chosen. That night, I found Thomas Reynolds' address online. I stared at it for a long time. Then I whispered to myself, "Mom, I'm doing this because I have to, not because I want to."
The next morning, December 16th, I drove through Nashville's quiet neighborhoods, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. The sky was gray, the kind that looks like it might rain, but never fully commits. Christmas decorations lined nearly every yard, inflatable Santas, wreaths, string lights wrapped around bare trees. Thomas Reynolds' house was a modest brick home in a peaceful Franklin suburb. White shutters, a porch swing, a bird feeder swaying in the light wind. I parked across the street and just sat there, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my fingers hurt. I was 50 years old, but in that moment, I felt like a child again, scared, unprepared, unsure of where I belonged. Finally, with my heart pounding, I stepped out. As I walked toward the house, The front door opened slightly. A tall man in his 70s stepped onto the porch, a mug in hand. His hair was silver, neatly combed, his posture straight, his eyes sharp, curious. And something about his face, his jawline, maybe his eyebrows, made my stomach twist. He called out gently, "Can I help you?" My breath hitched. My voice cracked. "Are you Thomas Reynolds?" He stiffened, like the name surprised him. "Yes, that's me." For a second, I almost turned around, ran back to the car, pretended this whole thing never existed. But then I said the words that changed everything. "My mother was Margaret Collins. She lived in Cleveland. You knew her in 1993. His expression didn't change all at once. It shifted slowly, like a memory returning after decades. His mug trembled. He set it carefully on the porch rail. Then his voice dropped to a whisper. "Margaret." He stepped closer, studying my face, not rudely, but with a softness that felt strangely familiar. "You look," he swallowed, "you look like her." I hadn't expected that. My throat tightened. "I found a letter. She told me you two knew each other, and that you never knew about me." Thomas didn't reply immediately. He gripped the porch railing with both hands and lowered his head. I couldn't tell if he was shocked, angry, or heartbroken. Finally, he said, barely audible, "She never told me she had a child." I nodded, tears threatening. "She said she didn't know whether telling you would help or hurt." He exhaled shakily. "Oh, Margaret, always trying to protect everyone." There was a long, fragile silence, just the sound of a distant wind chime somewhere down the street. Then he looked at me with eyes full of 30 years of unanswered questions. "Do you want to come in?" I nodded. Inside, his home was warm, decorated with soft white Christmas lights and simple ornaments. A framed nativity scene sat on a wooden cabinet. A small Christmas tree glowed in the corner. Nothing extravagant, just peaceful. He asked gently, "Do you want tea? Coffee?" "Tea," I whispered. When he returned with 2 mugs, he sat across from me at the kitchen table, elbows on the wood, hands folded as if bracing himself. "Tell me," he said, "tell me everything." I explained the letter, my mother's passing, the attic, the storm, the years of silence. He listened without interrupting, only nodding slowly, eyes glistening. When I finished, he leaned back and wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "I always wondered why she left so suddenly," he murmured. "We connected deeply, but when she returned to Ohio, she cut off all communication. I thought I'd done something wrong." His voice cracked. "I would have wanted to know. I would have wanted to be there." Something in me softened, not because I needed a new father, but because I saw a man mourning a life he never got to have. After a long moment, he asked, "Emily, what do you want from me? An explanation, a relationship, or just closure?" The honesty of his question hit me hard, so human, so vulnerable. "I don't know yet," I admitted. "I just want to understand who I am." He nodded. "That we can do together." We spent hours talking about Mom, about Portland, about his life in Tennessee. He showed me old photos from 1993, and in one of them I saw something that made my breath stop. Mom smiling wider than I had ever seen in any picture back home. For the first time since opening the letter, I felt something other than fear. I felt connected. When I finally left his house that evening, he walked me to my car. The street was quiet, Christmas lights glowing softly against the darkening sky. Before I opened the door, he said carefully, "Emily, if you ever want to come back, you're welcome, not because of what might be true, but because I want to know you." I nodded, tears rising again. "I think I want that too." As I drove back to the hotel, Nashville's lights shimmering through the mist, I realized something. The letter didn't destroy my family. It changed it. It expanded it. It complicated it. But it didn't destroy it. And maybe, just maybe, it gave me a second chance at a part of my life I never knew was missing. Christmas that year wasn't peaceful. It wasn't simple. It wasn't the kind you see in movies. But it was real. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I was finally learning the whole truth about where I came from and where I was meant to go next.